Hi everyone, I'm Robbie Jenkins, and this is Breaking Boundaries, a place where we take posing beyond the stage. So, I've been thinking about starting a podcast or something similar to this for the last year. I just hadn't really had the guts to do it yet. But I wanted to have a platform to where I could bring other artists together, whether they were posing artists, whether they were videographers, really anybody that has to do with the artistry of posing. And so finally decided to do it. So I'll be interviewing, like I said, different artists, some videographers, but I figured what was a better way to start than giving you guys a little bit of my background, what posing has done for me, what it is for me, what it means to me, and what I kind of hope to build through this podcast. So I've been competing in bodybuilding since about 2019. I competed in women's figure for the first 3 years or so of my bodybuilding career. Um, and I started contemplating going into women's physique around 2021. Um, but one of the things that always kind of held me back from it was the posing routines. I didn't think that I could choreograph something like that, let alone get on stage. A lot of what I had seen, or at least what I had been exposed to at that point, was very, very cheesy and just not really who I was. And I didn't feel like I could do that on stage. And so it wasn't until I was working the Tampa Pro in 2021 where I saw a female bodybuilder on stage, and she had a posing routine that absolutely captivated me. I remember watching her and getting goosebumps. And the way that she did it, everything flowed so smooth and so beautifully, and it was really hard to look away. And I remember thinking to myself, if I were to do this, like that is what I want to do. Like, that is what I want to make people feel. And so I really started considering going into women's physique. And then after my show in 2021 at NPC North Americans, which was a complete disaster, I decided to chuck the heels and go for it. But my actual posing journey started later that year, December 21, possibly even January 22. And I was going through a lot of different things. I was going through a career transition. I was going through a divorce, moving. I had sold a lot of my stuff. And so there was just a whole lot of change. There was a whole lot of emotion. And then, like many people on the planet, there was a lot of things that I'd been through where I never really had fully sorted through it or let myself feel, what happened through it. And so I had always used the gym as my method of coping, if you will. But in reality, it wasn't so much coping as it was more like punishing myself and running away from emotions. And so my coach, Kenneth Almond, he sat me out of the gym for 2 weeks and he said, you need to find another way to cope. You need to learn how to sit with yourself, and your stress levels are too high. Like, the gym's not going to do any good for you right now. So we're going to pull you out for 2 weeks. And I asked him, what am I going to do? And he said, figure it out. So it was probably a couple days after that, I had seen on Instagram a posing challenge. And I think the first one that I saw was put on Instagram by Jared Crew, and he had his business Coach by Flow. And so I figured, what the heck? I have to learn how to do this anyway. So it's something to get me moving. I have to practice, I have to figure it out. Like, I guess this is the time to do it. And so that's when I actually got started in posing. Um, and man, it was not easy at all. I remember looking back at some of the challenges that I did, and there's just, it was very, very blocky. It didn't flow well. Angles weren't great. Lines weren't good. I really didn't know what I was doing. I was just putting in the effort, but I started having a lot of fun with it regardless. And when I got exposed to that, I also started getting more exposed to other people that were like really big in bodybuilding, that were phenomenal posers, but I just hadn't paid that much attention to. And so as I started seeing these different people with these different styles of posing, I started kind of taking in what they were doing and trying to learn more from that. And then any posing challenge that Jarek would throw out, or Jacob Palmer would throw out, I would jump into. And so probably my first 3 or 4 months of posing, the majority of it was just watching other people, watching videos on YouTube, studying their movements, studying how they moved, kind of visualizing it in my head. I'd hide in my studio apartment and I would practice doing what they did because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't have a background in dance. I didn't really know how to move. I had a background in band, so I kind of understood musicality and like rhythm and timing. But as far as how to make my body move with that, absolutely not. So I think it was probably about month 3 or 4 of posing where I was finally able to put together like a 60-second routine that I looked back at, and I was like, oh, like this is something. Like, it's not much, but it's better than what I've been doing, and this is something. And from there, that was really, I think, the first step in gaining confidence, and things kind of started to progress a whole lot faster. And so when I was on Instagram one morning, I had seen Kai Green had popped up, and he had commented on one of my videos, and I was completely baffled by it. And then about 3 weeks later, he did it again. And again, I was completely baffled by it. And at that point, I'd started using posing a lot more to sort through emotions. Once I got to the point where I could put together routines myself and not necessarily just only replicate what other people were doing, I was able to start putting more things into it, like emotion and things that were a lot more heartfelt. So it started to become a lot less robotic. And I noticed I was feeling better after that. So I think the first routine for me where posing went into something a lot more deeper and where I really started healing was I did a routine in the summer of 2022, and I did it to a song called Love Hate Alcohol by Post Malone. One of my friends at the time, he came into the gym once I got the routine how I wanted it, and he recorded it for me. And so for that song, I'd used my experience the last couple of years sorting through, um, going through rehab and um, becoming sober, some of the things that happened while I was like actively using alcohol as more of a coping mechanism, not something for social fun, when I was starting to use it in a really unhealthy way. And as I was building this routine, a lot of emotions came back. And so we recorded this routine, and when I got done, I realized how I was starting to become more able to tap into certain events to my life and not only like think about them, but I was actually able to feel them and start to process them a whole lot more. Um, and I'd been into therapy for multiple years at that point, but it had never really given me like a safe spot where I felt like I could really fully open up and um, express those things and bring them back and feel them. And it was something that posing did. And I think that is where part of my purpose had started. So, not too long after we filmed that video, I went out to Fort Worth, Texas. I went to an event called FitCon, and Kai, like I said, he had commented on a couple things that I had sent him. Um, and so I knew he was going to be at this event, and I thought, what the heck? Like, what do I have to lose? So I bought a plane ticket to go to Fort Worth, Texas with the intention of trying to talk to him and seeing if I could pose with him. I think I'd only been posing at 6 months at this point, but it actually miraculously worked out. He was doing a panel when I got there, and one of my friends and we sat in the front, and the guy looked over and we made eye contact, and you could tell he gave me this look where he was surprised to see me there. And so my buddy even looked at me and was like, yeah, he recognized you. This is good. And so we ended up talking after he got done with the panel, and he gave me his phone number. And when I got back to the hotel, I sent him the video of what I did to Love Hate Letter to Alcohol, and he loved it. And he sent me like this long text of what he saw and what I just sent him, and basically was like, I definitely want to work with you. So I pitched him an idea. I've always really liked collaborating. Didn't matter what kind of profession that I was in, but it was always fun to work on a project and bring a couple people into it and then find a way to work together. And so I had this concept in my head to a song that Tommy Prophet did a cover of, Bullet with Butterfly Wings. And so I pitched that to him, and it was a 3-person concept. And so he absolutely loved it. He flew me out there. My friend Jacob got to meet us down there, and then we start to nug out the details. And when I got there, luckily I was prepared, because I could not freestyle just off the cuff for crap. So I knew the part of the song that I wanted to do. And so I had practiced something to it. And thankfully I did, because we were in the studio and he said, all right, you know what you want to do for your part? I said, yeah. And he's like, okay, let's see it. And I was nervous for about 3-4 seconds going into it, but they started the music pretty fast, and I was gone. Absolutely gone after that. I was in my own world. And when I got done, Kai had mentioned not only was I an artist, but I was a storyteller. And he told me that, you can tell that you have a story to tell, and your soul is just screaming to tell it. And I think that was another pivotal point for me. I When I left there, I really started digging a lot more into my emotions and processing in order to build the routines that I did, to use it as not just a way to showcase my body, but as a means of actual expression, and not just for other people to see, but for me to communicate things that I had a hard time talking about, or rather communicate emotions that I had a really hard time expressing. I think people see stuff on my Instagram and they probably think that I'm a really vulnerable person, but in reality, I am only to a certain extent. When I'm really feeling a certain way and I'm really overwhelmed with emotions and they're very raw, very in the moment, I have the hardest time communicating what I'm feeling. And posing has become something where I don't have to speak. I can just let the song that I use and the way that I use to it, or the way that I move to it, and the motions that I do, or the expressions on my face, I can let that do the speaking for me. And so the more that I explored this, um, I found the more healing I was finding in a lot of different things that had happened in the past, but not only in the past, things that I was going through even in the present, whether they were big or small. Um, I was able to get to a point where I no longer would bury them, but I would find a song that I related to, that related to what I was feeling in that moment, and then I would just take it to the studio and I'd start playing with it. Um, and then eventually, like I was able to let it out, and it became something that was very, very therapeutic, and it also unlocked the reality that I had a lot more of a creative spirit. And I honestly believe that most people are more creative than they give themselves for, or give themselves credit for. Um, so that's where my purpose for this stemmed from. I love bodybuilding. I love everything that it's done. I love the discipline that it's given me. Um, but if it wasn't for the posing aspect and getting into creativity and getting into expression, not only would I ever have gotten to a point today where I feel like, it's always a work in progress, but it's something that I'm not afraid of working toward. I'm not afraid of emotions anymore. I still have a hard time like verbalizing them in the moment, but I'm able to quickly take that, go to the studio, go to somewhere quiet where nobody's around, and I'm able to sort through it and able to get it out. And so with the podcast, I feel like if I get that from posing, there's a really good chance that other artists that are in this industry also get something similar in their art. And it might not be in the exact same way, but I think that everybody has a story. And what I want to do with this is really open up an authentic dialogue with people that love to do this and get to know their story and share some of their art and share the deeper meaning of what it meant to them. And through that, hopefully inspire other people that are either watching or other aspiring artists who are watching to be more encouraged to find a way to tell your story. And maybe that's through posing, maybe it's through something else. But I really just want to create a space to where we can connect not as bodybuilders, but humans that have the same love for creativity and go through things that oftentimes inspire some of the art that we create. Um, the other thing with this too is I feel like bodybuilding has a bit of a rough reputation to those that are outside of the niche. But I feel like posing is the part of the sport where you don't just win over judges, but if you really truly express yourself on stage, you are going to connect back with the people that are watching you in that moment. Um, it's where we not only show our physique, but where we show our humanity, where we show our emotions. And the thing is everybody experiences the same emotions at one point or the other. So we recognize emotion when we see it. And so there just gets to be that sense of connection. I feel like that comes through posing. That might not necessarily come through other aspects of bodybuilding. So this is my why. This is why I'm doing this. I'm excited to see where it goes. Like I said, I'm going to do some interviews with some other artists, with some videographers. I'll even probably do some short videos where I'll pull up some of my stuff and go into a little bit more detail about what I was thinking or what I was going through or what I was pulling from in order to create it. And hopefully just give another dimension to the sport to those who might see it and just can't really make sense of it. So stay tuned as other artists and myself come together and we take posing beyond the stage.